That Thursday night was supposed to be like any other. I was finishing up a late shift at my shop. Just me, an old Buick with a whining belt, and the smell of motor oil thick in the air. The shop clock read 9:36 when I wiped my hands on a rag and pulled out my phone. I had a text from Amber. At church for the evening. Can't talk now. Love you. Simple. Direct. Nothing unusual at first glance. I stared at the message for a second too long, though. Something about it felt off. Amber was the type to send smiley faces, even in serious messages. She never ended with just, love you. Usually it was, love you so much red heart, or, miss you already face blowing a kiss. Maybe it was dumb of me to notice that, but after almost 9 years of marriage, you learn a person's texting patterns the same way you know how they take their coffee or where they like to sit on the couch. Still, I told myself not to read into it. She was probably distracted, busy with her church group. They had a bake sale or donation drive coming up. I couldn't keep up with it all. She was always doing something for the community, always signing us up for things I'd gnawed through without fully paying attention. So I texted back, just being playful. I'm nearby. Might swing by and say hi. The 3 dots never showed up. I waited, letting the minutes slide by as I cleaned up the shop. I checked again, no response. The message still said, delivered, not read. I frowned, checked the time again. 9:42. It wasn't late, and I figured if she was in a church meeting or praying or whatever, maybe she just had her phone silenced. But the silence kept stretching. 10 minutes. 15. My stomach started doing this slow twist, the kind you can't quite explain but also can't ignore. You know when your body knows something before your brain lets you say it out loud? That's what it felt like. Eventually, I grabbed my keys, locked up, and drove the 4 blocks to St. Mary's on 8th. The church she always mentioned when she said she had group meetings. I even remember asking her one time if she ever thought about inviting me along, and she'd laughed, saying, "You'd be bored out of your mind, Scott. It's just spreadsheets and donation planning." But when I pulled into the church lot, my headlights swept across rows of empty parking spots. Not a single car in sight. No light inside the stained glass windows. No ambient glow from the fellowship hall. Just darkness. The kind of stillness that lets you hear the creak of your own shoes as you step onto pavement. I parked anyway and got out of the truck. Maybe they moved locations, I thought. Or maybe they ended early. But if that were the case, where was her car? Where was Amber? I walked the perimeter once, slowly. The lot wrapped around the building, and the back was just as deserted. No voices, no laughter, no choir practice echoing through the walls like it sometimes did when I used to wait for her after service. Just the hum of the street lamp overhead and the occasional chirp of crickets in the grass. I checked my phone again. 10:07. Still nothing from Amber. No text. No call. My earlier message still sat there unread. That's when something really shifted in me. Not full-blown panic. Not yet. But this cold awareness that I had just stepped into a scene that didn't match the story I was being told. I stood there for a while longer, not doing anything. Just staring at the church doors like they were supposed to swing open and explain everything. When they didn't, I got back into my truck and drove home. Didn't speed. Didn't play music. I just drove in silence, hands tight around the steering wheel. She came through the front door at 11:14. I was still sitting on the couch, TV glowing in the background. Some rerun I wasn't watching. I heard the key turn, the click of the door, the sound of a grocery bag rustling as she walked in. "Hey," she called casually. "You still up?" I didn't respond right away. I watched her come into view like it was a movie I'd seen before. Amber was dressed like she'd been out running errands. Yoga pants, a loose sweater, hair pulled back in one of those high messy buns. She set the bag on the kitchen counter and started unpacking it. "Sorry I was out so late," she said, not looking at me. "Rhonda asked if I could stop by Target after the meeting. They needed some stuff for Sunday's brunch. Oh, and I picked up that creamer you like." She turned and smiled. It was a warm smile, soft. The kind of smile that used to make me feel at home. I nodded, still not saying much. She launched into an explanation, not prompted, not questioned. Just smooth and steady. "Meeting ran late. We had to finalize the budget for the youth group. Pastor Mike was there, along with Danielle and a couple of the parents. You know how it goes, too many opinions and not enough coffee. She chuckled at her own joke. I managed a thin smile. Everything she said made sense if you took it at face value. She even pulled out a receipt from Target and showed me what she'd bought. It all checked out. Yogurt, paper towels, a multi-pack of Sharpies. But I was still stuck back in that empty parking lot. That cold night air. That silence. And now her sudden, overly detailed story, every name, every errand perfectly placed. Like a script she had rehearsed on the way home. "Sorry I didn't text back," she added as she placed the groceries in the fridge. "I had my phone on Do Not Disturb and forgot to check it after." That's when she finally turned to me, really looked at me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, a little too quickly. "Just tired." She nodded, walked over, kissed me on the forehead, and went upstairs to shower. And just like that, the night returned to quiet. But sleep didn't come for me. I lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling while the whir of the ceiling fan spun in slow circles above me. My body was still, but my mind was sprinting. I kept seeing that dark church, that empty lot, my unread message. She hadn't answered, and now she was home, calm, composed, full of explanations that made too much sense too quickly. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she really had been exactly where she said she was, doing exactly what she claimed. But there was a voice in the back of my head. A low whisper I hadn't heard in a long time. It said, "Scott, pay attention." And I did. Because something wasn't right. Not with that text. Not with that empty church. And definitely not with the way my wife looked me in the eye and smiled like nothing at all had happened. I didn't sleep that night. Amber came downstairs after her shower, kissed me goodnight, and went to bed like it was any other Thursday. I stayed on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, my brain too wired to settle. I told myself I'd follow her up in a bit. I didn't. Around midnight, I led the TV and just sat there, letting the dark fill the room. That quiet voice from earlier, the one that whispered "pay attention," had gotten louder. Not in words exactly, more like a pressure. A feeling in my chest like something just beneath the surface was waiting to be noticed. And once I gave it room, it started to speak in memories. Little things mostly, stuff I hadn't thought much about in the moment. But now, they lined up in a way that made my stomach clench. 3 weeks ago, Amber changed her perfume. Not a big deal, right? People change scents. But this one, it was sharp, musky. A more dramatic fragrance. Like something you'd wear on a night out. The thing was, she used to hate scents like that. I remembered because I'd bought her a bottle just like it back in our second year together, and she wrinkled her nose, saying it gave her a headache. "Too heavy," she'd said. Not me. But now, she wore it every time she left the house after 6 p.m. Then there was the laundry. She used to be careless about it. Shirts tossed in the basket, lipstick smudges on collars, faint traces of her day mixed in with mine. But lately, the basket stayed oddly empty. Her side of the hamper looked untouched most of the week. She started doing smaller loads of her own, usually when I wasn't home, folding her clothes and putting them away before I ever saw them. And the wedding ring, Amber always wore it. She even joked once that it felt weirdly naked to go without it. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing it. I noticed it missing once when we went out for dinner, and she laughed it off, saying she'd forgotten after washing dishes. That made sense. But then I noticed again the following week, and the week after that. Each time, a different excuse. Lotion made it slippery, swelling fingers, just forgot. It wasn't until I sat there in the dark, putting it all together, that the picture started to form. She also started leaving the house more often. Errands, meetings, drop-offs for the charity board. And every time it was last minute. Rhonda just texted, "Mike's in a bind. They need someone to pick up chairs for the fundraiser." Always urgent. Always unavoidable. And I never questioned it because it was Amber. She'd built her identity around being dependable, involved, trustworthy. God, I wanted to believe her. But there were other things. Things I didn't want to admit had bothered me until now. She took more phone calls in private. She used to be loud about everything. I'd hear half her conversations while cooking dinner. Lately, she'd step into the guest room to talk, sometimes even take the call out on the back deck. One night, I walked out there thinking she was alone, and she actually jumped, when she saw me, said it was a church member venting, and didn't want to break their trust. That's the kind of thing I would have believed without question 6 months ago. Now I couldn't stop asking questions. I got up off the couch and walked into the kitchen. Stood there barefoot on the cold tile, staring at the half-empty grocery bag she'd left behind. There were things in it that didn't make sense. A single bottle of vitamin water, breath mints, pack of gum, travel-sized deodorant. Not weird on their own, but weird when you said you were running errands for a church brunch. The receipt sat next to it. Time-stamped at 10:54 p.m. I knew Target closed at 11. And St. Mary's? Completely dark at 10:05. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and stared into the quiet. This wasn't about catching someone red-handed. There were no lipstick stains, no anonymous texts, no mystery hotel charges, not yet. Anyway, this was about how it all felt. The accumulation of tiny, carefully placed lies dressed up as routine. And the thing about lies is, they eventually rot from the inside out. I started noticing the emotional distance too. Amber used to talk to me about everything, even the boring stuff. Her coworker drama, the price of eggs, whatever show she was binging. But lately, her voice was all surface. Friendly, polite, like a customer service rep keeping me on hold. I couldn't remember the last time we had a real conversation. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd say, busy. Ask what she did at the meeting. She'd say, same old stuff. Then she'd ask about my shop, but in that way that let me know she wasn't really listening. It's strange how a person can sit next to you on the same couch, under the same roof, and still feel miles away. And I guess I had to admit something else too. Something I wasn't proud of. I let it slide. All of it. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to know. I wanted to keep the peace. I thought if I just gave her space, she'd come back to me. I told myself it was a rough patch, a stressful season. I blamed myself for working late too often, for not noticing sooner, for maybe not being exciting enough. But now, that quiet voice was screaming, not in anger, in clarity. Amber was hiding something, and I couldn't pretend not to see it anymore. I walked back into the living room, sat down, and opened my phone again. Scrolled through old messages, old photos. Looked at pictures of us smiling at barbecues, at weddings, on vacation. She looked happy in them. So did I. But it was like looking at someone else's life now. Like I'd stumbled on a photo album in a stranger's attic. That's when I realized what was really keeping me up. It wasn't fear. It was grief. Because some part of me knew, even before the proof, even before the confrontation, that something had already ended. Quietly. Without announcement, like a light flickering out in a room you hadn't walked into in a while. Amber hadn't just changed her perfume or started taking private calls. She'd started leaving me long before I noticed. By the next morning, something in me had shifted. It wasn't rage, not exactly. I wasn't flipping tables or screaming into the void. I was just done pretending, done ignoring the signs, brushing off the silences, talking myself into believing Amber's half-answers. I'd spent the night walking through our life like it was a crime scene, and the more I replayed things, the more obvious it became. I wasn't going to get the truth by asking for it. Not from her. If she was willing to lie to my face with that calm smile and grocery bag full of decoys, then there was no point trying to reason my way to answers. I needed facts. Hard ones. Neutral, undeniable, photographic ones. So I called Rick. Rick isn't a close friend. He's more of a guy you hear about through someone else. Someone who helps people get answers. If you know what I mean. He used to be a cop, now works as a private investigator. Discreet. Expensive. Efficient. I didn't know what I was hoping he'd find, but I knew I couldn't keep living in limbo, second-guessing every glance, every errand, every phone call taken behind a closed door. We met that afternoon at a small diner just off the highway. I was nervous. Not about seeing Rick, but about what this step meant. Hiring someone meant I was serious. It meant I was opening a door I couldn't close again. Rick was exactly what you'd expect. 50-something, silver hair, leather notebook, the kind of eyes that never missed a thing. We sat in the back booth, away from the windows, and I laid it all out. She says she's at church events, but I've been to the church. It's dark, empty, locked. She comes home with a story that's too perfect. New perfume, missing ring, private calls. She's not the same, and I don't know if I'm crazy or if something's really going on. Rick nodded slowly, jotting things down. Do you have a name? He asked. I blinked. A name? He looked up. Anyone you suspect she might be meeting? I thought about it. Honestly, I hadn't gone that far. I'd been so caught up in trying to believe her stories that I hadn't even considered the who. Then, like a string being pulled free, one name popped into my head. Alex, I said finally. He used to volunteer with her. Worked with her on those charity drives last year. I didn't think much of it then, but he was always around. Rick nodded again and underlined something in his notepad. Got it. Do you have a photo of him? I scrolled through Amber's social media until I found one. A group sh*T from a fundraiser last fall. Amber and Alex were standing next to each other, a little too close for comfort. I remembered that night. I'd skipped the event because of work. She said it was no big deal. Looking back, I wondered how many times I'd stayed home without realizing I was making it easier for her. Rick studied the photo, gave a quiet and tucked it into his folder. Give me a few days, he said, sipping his black coffee. I'll get you what you need. And he did. For days later, a manila envelope showed up on my doorstep in an unmarked package. No text, no call. Rick kept it clean. I waited until I was alone, sitting in the garage with the door closed, before I opened it. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Inside were photographs, printed, numbered, stamped with dates and times. And they told a story more clearly than words ever could. Amber, dressed like she was headed to a board meeting. Nice blouse, soft makeup, wedding ring noticeably absent. Exiting her car in the parking lot of a rundown motel just outside town. Alex, already there, leaning against his truck, holding the door for her. They went inside together. The timestamp read 8:42 p.m. Another photo, 10:17 p.m. Same door, same hallway. Amber and Alex walking out, laughing, close, like two people who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't care who might see them. There were more, different nights, same place, a rhythm to their meetings, each one lining up neatly with one of her so-called church nights. Rick even included a brief summary, car plate numbers matched. Amber's car, Alex's truck, both present at each location, sometimes for over an hour, sometimes for 2. I flipped through the photos again and again, hoping I'd missed something, hoping for an explanation that didn't end the way it so obviously did. But there wasn't one. That illusion I'd been clinging to, the hope that maybe I was wrong, maybe Amber was just going through something personal, something emotional, something temporary. It shattered into dust in my hands. She hadn't just lied. She hadn't just drifted away. She had chosen this. She had coordinated, planned, and covered her tracks. All while kissing me goodnight, buying groceries, and talking about Sunday potlucks. I felt sick. Physically, actually. My stomach turned, and I had to set the photos down before I threw up right there in the garage. I sat on the concrete floor for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. Every memory of the last few months played in my head with new color, now tinted with betrayal. The late arrivals, the unread texts, the perfume, all of it now laid bare. Eventually, I picked up the envelope and sealed it shut again. Not because I was in denial, that part was gone, but because I didn't want to see her face smiling back at me in those photos anymore. There was one thing I knew for certain. I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't going to confront her with anger or accusations. I wasn't going to raise my voice or demand explanations. If she could lie that easily, she could lie through a confrontation, too. No, I needed to let her reveal herself. So I made a plan. I checked Rick's notes and picked one of the upcoming dates that lined up with another church meeting. Then I checked St. Mary's website. No events scheduled. No public functions. Just a locked building and silence. Perfect. The next time she left the house in a rush, saying, "I'll be back late. Don't wait up," I followed her. Not closely. I let her get far enough ahead. She drove the same route. Took the same turn onto the old highway. Same pattern. But this time I went somewhere else. I went to the church. I parked in front of the dark building, leaned back in my seat, and waited. And 25 minutes later, something incredible happened. She came walking out from behind the church. Not the front. Not the side entrance. Behind. She looked around, like someone checking to make sure the coast was clear, then made her way toward her car. Her phone was in her hand. She was texting someone. Her face was lit by the screen, a faint smile playing on her lips. That's when I called her. Her phone lit up in her hand. She looked at the screen, frowned, then slowly turned in the direction of my truck. I didn't move. I just watched her. The expression on her face when she realized I was sitting there? I'll never forget it. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her jaw twitched. Her whole body went stiff, like a deer in headlights. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood there frozen. And I didn't say a word. I let the silence fill the space between us. I let her sit in it. Let her understand what it felt like to be seen. She walked toward the truck slowly, like a student walking into the principal's office. I unlocked the door. She got in without saying anything. We drove home in total silence. No radio, no excuses, just the sound of tires on pavement. When we got home, I walked into the kitchen and placed the manila envelope on the table. Then I walked away. She didn't open it right away, just stared at it like it might explode. When she finally did, her hands trembled. She flipped through each photo, slower than I expected. Her eyes started to gloss over by the fourth one. By the sixth, she was crying. By the eighth, she tried to speak. "I can expel." I held up a hand. "No more stories." She broke. Full-on sobs, the kind that twist the throat and crack the chest. She reached for me and I stepped back. "You have 1 hour," I said quietly. "Pack what you need. Scott, please just let me." 1 hour. And I walked out. The house was too quiet. I stood out in the backyard for most of that hour, leaning against the railing of our old deck, the same one I'd sanded and stained 2 summers ago, while Amber brought me lemonade and told me I'd missed a spot. I stared out over the fence into the neighbor's yard, familiar, unchanged. Their porch light flickered like it always did. Kids' bikes lay scattered in the grass. Everything around me looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Inside, I could hear drawers opening and closing, the soft clack of hangers sliding across a rod. Amber was packing, quietly, like she didn't want to disturb something. Or maybe like she was trying to delay the moment when she'd have to face me again. Part of me expected her to walk out the door without another word. That would have made it cleaner, simpler. But of course, that's not how this played out. 55 minutes in, she appeared in the doorway behind me, suitcase in one hand, purse over her shoulder, envelope in the other. Her face was blotchy, tear-streaked and puffy, eyes rimmed with red. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but like a version of herself had collapsed inward. She opened her mouth to speak. I turned to face her, but didn't say a word. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she'd try again. But the silence between us was thick, final. And maybe she understood that. Maybe she knew there was nothing she could say that would make sense now. No rewinding, no damage control, no talking her way through this. So she stepped forward and held out the envelope, now full of the photos I'd given her. "I don't want to keep these," she whispered. "I can't." I didn't reach for it, just nodded once. She set it down on the porch rail. "I'm so sorry, Scott." The words landed like dust. Weightless. Too late. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because there was nothing I could say that hadn't already been said in silence. She had made her choices. I had made mine. She stared at me for a long moment. maybe waiting for a flicker of softness. A sign I'd cave, a crack in the wall. But she didn't find one. Eventually, she gave a quiet, defeated nod and walked down the steps to the driveway. I watched as she loaded the suitcase into her trunk, moving slowly, like every gesture cost her something. She sat in the car for a full minute before starting the engine. When she finally drove away, I stayed outside, arms crossed, until the taillights vanished at the end of the street. And that was it. No shouting, no begging, no wild accusations or thrown plates or broken glass. Just a door closing quietly behind a person I no longer recognized. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in the living room with the lights off, Amber's words replaying faintly in my mind like echoes. I'm so sorry. But even those faded eventually. What stayed was the image of her walking out, shoulders hunched, back turned. I tried to remember the last time I truly saw her, really saw her, before all of this started. Maybe it was at the lake last spring. We had a picnic, just the two of us. I remembered her laughing at how cold the water was, holding her sandals in one hand and my wrist in the other as she dared me to wade in with her. That version of her, light, unburdened, had been gone for months, maybe longer. And the worst part? I didn't even notice her slipping away. The next morning, I woke up with a dull headache and the heavy kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. I got dressed, made coffee like usual, and stood in the doorway of our bedroom. Half the closet was empty. The small ceramic tray on her nightstand, the one where she used to drop earrings and hair ties, was gone. Her favorite scarf still hung on the hook behind the door. She must have missed it. I didn't move it. Later that afternoon, I drove to the print shop and made another copy of the photos. Not for me, for someone else. Because as much as this had upended my life, I wasn't the only one living inside Amber's web of lies. There was Lauren, Alex's wife. We didn't know each other well. Just polite nods at charity events, a few shared conversations about weather and donations. I remembered once complimenting the lemon bars she'd made for the fall fundraiser. She laughed and said they were from a box. I liked her. She had an honesty to her that Amber used to have. I didn't want to deliver the envelope. I wasn't trying to be vindictive, but I couldn't let her keep living in the dark the way I had. She deserved the truth. So that evening, I drove to their house, a modest ranch style with a stone walkway and flower beds that were probably her doing. I didn't call or text. I just knocked, envelope in hand. Lauren answered in leggings and a sweater, hair pulled back. She smiled faintly when she saw me, a little confused. Scott, everything okay? I held out the envelope. I think you'll want to see this. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then back at me again. Is this about? It's what you think it is, I said quietly. She didn't open it. Not there. Not in front of me. But her expression shifted as she held it in her hands. Like some part of her had been expecting this. Like it confirmed what her gut had been whispering for weeks. I didn't wait around. Didn't explain. Just nodded and walked away. Scott, she called after me. Thank you. I paused on the sidewalk, turned halfway. I wish it wasn't true, I said. For both our sakes. And I left. The fallout didn't take long. By the next morning, Alex's car was gone from their driveway. I heard through a mutual contact that he'd been kicked out. Bags packed, key revoked, no discussion. Lauren wasn't subtle. She changed the locks, scrubbed his name from social media, and posted a cryptic quote about betrayal making you stronger. People talk in small towns. It doesn't take much. Within 48 hours, Amber's name vanished from the community board's website. Someone else was heading up the spring charity auction now. I got an email about it, addressed to Scott and family. I clicked unsubscribe. Alex, I heard, lost several of his logistics clients, people who didn't want their names associated with him anymore. His boss issued a statement about integrity expectations. He was gone by the end of the week. No one reached out to defend them. No messages of support, no mutual friends playing peacemaker. Just silence. That's the thing about secrets. Once the air hits them, they rot fast. Amber tried to reach out once. 2 days after she left. She didn't call. Just left a note in the mailbox. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened the flap. Inside was a small envelope with my name written across the front. No return address. Just 5 lines scribbled onto a page torn from a notebook. I was wrong. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't deserve any of this. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm sorry. I read it once, folded it in half, and placed it in the drawer beside the leftover photos. I didn't respond. What was there left to say? This wasn't a story with clean edges. There were no heroes, no final, dramatic confrontations, just quiet endings. Amber had made her exit. Alex too. They disappeared from the community like a storm that passed through and left broken branches behind. People asked me what happened, but I never answered directly. Just said we'd gone our separate ways. The rest they filled in themselves. Some part of me hated that our life had become a whispered version of itself, passed between people over coffee and errands. But another part of me, it didn't care anymore. The truth had its own gravity, and once it hit, nothing stayed where it was. The days after Amber left settled into a strange rhythm. Not peaceful exactly, more like numb. The kind of quiet that follows an explosion, where everything is still but nothing feels intact. I went to work, came home, made dinner, washed dishes. Normal things. But each task felt hollow, like I was just going through the motions of someone who used to live here. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because yours implodes. Word got out faster than I expected. Maybe it was the pictures. Maybe it was the way Amber left without any explanation. Maybe someone overheard something they weren't supposed to. Whatever it was, by the end of the week, our story, or at least the bones of it, had become local currency. And in a town like ours, betrayal doesn't just stay behind closed doors. People asked questions without asking them. The way someone lingers a second too long when saying, "How've you been?" Or how they tilt their head when they mention your wife without using her name. The subtleties pile up. But I didn't need to say anything. The truth had already taken on a life of its own. I first heard about the fallout through Tom, a guy I'd gone to high school with. He ran a landscaping company and sometimes did work for the small business plaza where Alex's office was. "You hear about Alex?" he asked, leaning over my counter as I was ringing up a customer. Lost half his clients overnight. One of them flat out told him he couldn't work with a man who'd screw around on a woman like Lauren. Said it's a bad look. I just nodded. No smile. No comment. Just let the moment hang. "Heard his boss gave him the boot too," Tom added. "Guess people don't want drama in their logistics." I didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say. Actions speak for themselves. A few days later, I got a call from someone on the charity board. Not for gossip, at least not directly, but to formally notify me that Amber had stepped down from her position. "We wish her well," they said, the words wrapped in corporate politeness. I could hear the discomfort in the woman's voice, the way she was dancing around the truth she didn't want to speak aloud. "She said she needed space," she continued. "Time to sort things out. We'll be reaching out to you for the upcoming event, if you're still comfortable attending." I said I'd think about it. I didn't. The board removed her name from their website within 24 hours. The profile picture of her standing with a plate of cookies and a beaming smile disappeared without a trace. It was like she'd never been part of it at all. Meanwhile, Alex became a ghost. I passed his truck once outside a laundromat. Beat up, unwashed, packed with boxes. He was sitting inside with the engine running, staring straight ahead, hands on the wheel like he wasn't sure where to go next. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and just couldn't look. Lauren, on the other hand, handled things differently. She wasn't loud, but she was decisive. I heard she changed the locks the same night I gave her the photos, took his name off the utilities, canceled his gym membership, even tossed out his mail. One of our mutuals said she'd found a divorce lawyer within the week. No delay, no second chances. And good for her. She didn't deserve that. None of us did. Amber, though. Amber didn't vanish all at once. She lingered. She tried to fold herself back into the edges of my life without really crossing the threshold. I started getting handwritten letters. Not long, but carefully written. like someone trying too hard to sound sincere without letting their panic bleed through. The first came 3 days after she left. No envelope, just a folded sheet left under the doormat. Scott, I don't know how to live with what I've done. I think about the look on your face that night and it *LS me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say that I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for breaking something we built for almost a decade. You didn't deserve this. None of it. I lost myself, and I don't know who that person was. But she's gone now. Amber. I didn't reply. I didn't even take it inside. Just refolded it and tossed it into the trash bin by the garage. Then came the voicemail. 10 minutes long. Rambling. A mix of apologies and nostalgia. Like she thought recounting how we met or the night I proposed would change something. I was scared, she said near the end. Not of you, of how far I drifted. I didn't know how to come back. And then I just stopped trying. I didn't listen to the whole thing. Deleted it halfway through. Next, she started contacting mutual friends. Quietly at first. Checking in, asking how I was doing. Testing the water. Then she started asking them to pass messages along. Not direct ones. Just vague, emotional appeals like, tell Scott I miss him. Or, tell him I'd take it all back if I could. I told them not to respond. Told them not to act as messengers. If she wanted closure, she'd already had it. It was written in every silence I gave her. One day, I ran into her by accident. At the grocery store of all places. She looked thinner, eyes darker, like someone who hadn't slept right in weeks. She was holding a basket with maybe 3 things in it: peanut butter, a bag of trail mix, and a single bottle of red wine. She saw me before I saw her, froze, half raised a hand, then stopped. We stood maybe 6 feet apart near the cereal aisle. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Her mouth opened like she wanted to speak. Some kind of greeting, maybe an apology, but nothing came out. She just stood there, staring, until I walked past her without breaking stride. Didn't look back. That was the last time I saw her in person. After that, she stopped writing, stopped reaching out, stopped showing up. It was like she finally understood what silence meant. Not indifference,